So last week we explored one particle of anything, even dust and ashes, contains the whole universe. So I was very pleased to have that confirmed by the New York Times on Sunday. I always like to get that certification. In the Sunday Review, there was an article about the reality of quantum weirdness. We all know, in fact, I think I mentioned it last week, how quantum theory and modern physics confirm some of the more extraordinary, paradoxical things that the mystics have always known about the interconnectedness of everything, for example, and the fact that the part contains the whole, which is what I was just saying. And in fact, at the very end, if you may have read it, the very end of the article speaks about the unknown infinite possibilities of our own existence. It says, this is poignantly and elegantly expressed in the Vedas, the Hindu scriptures, the original early Hindu scriptures. As is the atom, so is the universe. So there you are. Of course, it's a little bit before the New York Times. It's the Vedas, which is 2,000, 3,000 years ago. As is the atom, so is the universe. And then it continues to the Vedas. As is the microcosm, so is the macrocosm. Very familiar, esoteric, hermetic declaration, fundamental truth, verity. Continues, as is the human body, so is the cosmic body. And it concludes, as is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. The last word of the article, and the last word. Of course, Zen would say there is no last word, because there's no first word either, but as is the human body, so is the cosmic body. As is the human mind, so is the cosmic mind. And so mind and body. What's the connection? And I'd like to reflect a little bit more on the bodily dimension of absolute reality, lest we think that the traditions don't affirm that. Christianity with the incarnation, that should be second nature, and yet it isn't really. I'm also inspired to do this because Richard Rohr, whom most of you know as a great friend and mentor, he was on Oprah a few weeks ago on Super Soul Sunday. I like that, Super Soul. Super Soul Sunday. And Oprah asked him, he's talking about the true self, the immortal diamond, and she said, well, so is the soul the true self? And a shoddy, quick answer might say, yes, the soul is the true self, not the body. But he didn't say that. He said, he thought a second and then said, that's 80 or 90% true, but there's a bodily dimension to your true self, a material dimension to your true self. Very true. So when you speak about your true self, or even your quote spiritual self, you're not just talking about your soul, certainly not in the traditional Christian sense or philosophical sense, but as the resurrection of the body proves, and we'll come back to that in a moment, there is a material dimension to your true self. So again, just as I looked at the Hekigan Roku, the Blue Cliff record last week for a couple of koans to illustrate this, to show that this is very much in tune with Zen. So again, we'll do that this week. One that I've commented before, at number 40, Nanson's The Flower. Someone was speaking with Nansen, the great master of Joshu, and said, heaven and earth and I are of the same root. So, interconnectedness of everything. He's quoting a famous writing. All things and I are of one substance. Isn't that absolutely fantastic? Wow, yeah, absolutely. But Nansen was supposed to bring him down a little from the exaltation and inflation, possibly, and he says, he pointed to a flower in the garden and said, people these days see this flower as though they were in a dream. And people walking through the streets of New York City, or even Central Park, see the flower as though in a dream, because most of the time they're not looking. And then reasoning that they and the flower are all one substance. So to bring us back down, right there in the flower, or as in the atom, the particle, as we said last week, is absolute reality. Emptiness is form, form is emptiness, everything is right there, including that physical dimension. The Hermetic tradition speaks about this very well, and I think this is a good way to understand reality. It's spirit and soul, psychic energy, and material energy, I mean, energy, physical energy, and body form a continuum, like a chain of being. So it's consciousness, spirit, consciousness, soul, energy, and matter are a continuum. So body is really congealed spirit. So how could they not be one? How could not that be a part of the ultimate reality? And that's something, you can theorize about, or you can actually experience it, which is what Zen tries to get us to do. So that's why, as a non-sense, speaking, pointing at the flower when you're talking about absolute reality. And this comes up time and time again. For example, just a few koans later, Joshu, the student, successor of Hansen, the monk asks him in number 45, so all the dharmas are reduced to oneness, but what is this oneness reduced to? What is contained in this one? And Joshu said, when I was in Seishu, I made a hempen shirt, weighed 7 pounds. And like another one which says, what is the absolute reality? It's 3 pounds of flax. In other words, it's always pointing to not only the particular, as we saw last week, but the material. You don't abstract from the material part. It's right there. Emptiness and form is one. Spirit and matter are one. Energy and matter are one. God and matter are one. That's what we mean by Jesus. It shouldn't be a surprise to us, but it is. Again, just two koans later, the monk asked Uma, what is the Dharmakaya? According to Mahayana cosmology, there are 3 bodies to the Buddha, 3 different levels, and the highest is the Dharmakaya, which is the absolute. But remember, the absolute doesn't mean that it's separated from everything else. So he replies, what is the Dharmakaya? It is, this is a little tricky. Apparently the most literal translation is, the 6 not containable. So the 6 he may be referring to are the 6 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, space, and consciousness. Let's see how they're all form a continuum. Or they may even be the 6 senses that perceive them: seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and consciousness. But they're not containable. So even all those seemingly material elements and faculties are not containable. And that's the Dharmakaya. They're not contained, but they're open to and a dimension of absolute reality. Is this making some kind of sense? This one's perhaps a little clearer, even. Number 82. And this addresses precisely the question of the resurrection of the body as within this context. Anyway, so a monk said to the master, case 82, the human body will ultimately decompose. What is the indestructible Dharma body? So you might think he's going to say, oh, the soul, the spirit, or whatever. But he says, flowers cover the hillside like a brocade. The veil lies deep in shade. So somehow just the flowers, that's according to biblical poetry, rise in the morning and wither at night. And Jesus says the same thing about lilies of the field, on one level of perception. The ultimate Dharmakaya, indestructible body, will somehow include that. It is that, just covering the flowers covering the hillside. What veil in the woods. Interesting. Yeah, 3 pounds of flax there too. So we have to remember that whatever the ultimate reality is, it includes directly and organically the material element. Now, as we know, what it requires, any tradition says it requires kind of a rehabilitation of all those energies, bodily passions and things like that, transformation, harmonization, purification, all the traditions point that out. But it is nonetheless included. Or as Reginald Ray, and I've quoted him before, his Touching Enlightenment, his wonderful book, speaks precisely about the bodily dimension of enlightenment, and he says very baldly and boldly, there is no enlightenment apart from the body. It's good for Christians to remember that, and they should know better already. And it's good for Buddhists to remember that, because sometimes they go off, like human tendency is, to try and abstract from the reality. And the problem with that is that you're abstracting from it. You're drawing away, literally, is what abstract means. You're pulling away from the fullness of reality in the name of some kind of pseudo-spirituality. So, for example, and Reginald Ray points this out too, and this is very Christian, these Tibetan practice of Tonglen, where you take in not only your own suffering, but the sufferings of all the universe, like Jesus did, we say, on the cross. You're bringing in all those energies and harmonizing them. You're not running away from them, you're taking them in. Not just in your own case, but the whole universe. You're acting as a transformer, as a purifier for the universe. And that's the compassion. That is the very name of deepest reality, whether you're personalizing it or not, or however you personalize it. It includes all of that and is open to all of that. And our own resurrection body is in function of that. Not only what we do for ourselves, but what we can do for others. That would be another, teisho to talk about resurrection body. I think we've touched on this before, but by far the most, I'm not sure I pointed this out, by far the most eloquent and profound treatment of the resurrection body from an esoteric point of view, but by a professed Christian, is in the Meditations on the Tarot. I think I've mentioned that book before. I'm not alone among Christian monks and others who say it's the most profound book they ever read, which is pretty high praise. Anyway, it's chapter 20 on the 20th Arcana, which is the judgment, death and judgment. And there, the idea is that you build up your resurrection body, not only over a lifetime, but over lifetimes. And that's another whole teisho, right? Reincarnation. But I just point out that that's part of the Hermetic tradition, even within Christianity. Just pointing it out. I didn't make it up. I'm not judging it either. So But whether it's lifetime or lifetimes, the point is that the goal is to harmonize to these different levels of awareness and consciousness, to integrate and harmonize and include the material dimension, the emotional dimension, the passionate dimension, the bodily dimension of reality. Not only our own, but others. And we're all the same body anyway! How could we not include others? Because there is no other. It's all the body of Christ in pretty simple, straightforward Christian language. It's all the one body of the Buddha, as Bernie Glassman says. Roshi. So this is deep stuff. And it brings up the notion of, and I'll conclude with this part. It brings up the notion of karma. Remember, that was supposed to be the driving force of reincarnation. When you didn't work out, you had to keep coming back and working it out. And how you could atone and change, by the way you live now, to facilitate that process. There's actually a koan about that here. 97. The Diamond Sutra, one of the most revered sutras in Mahayana Buddhism. It's called The Diamond Sutras, The Transgression is Wiped Out. And it's simply a quote from the Diamond Sutra. It says, if anyone is despised by others, even if he has committed some serious transgression in a former life, and been doomed to fall into the evil world, the transgression in the former life is wholly wiped out by virtue of the fact that he is despised in this life. That makes sense. And within this worldview, anyway, right? But it's a koan. It's not just a quote from, quote, scripture. It's a koan. It's asking you to go deeper and deeper into what this is saying or not saying, or what should be saying, what it might be implicating, based on your practice. There's a poem here which might be part of the Blue Cliff record, which might give us a clue here. Holding the jewel, merit is rewarded. Free from merit, the jewel reflects no more. Truly meritless, the heavens seek in vain. Gautama, Gautama, the Buddha, you know the secret. Everything lies open. So what is that? It means with a single second of enlightenment, everything is washed away. There's no more karma anymore when you're awake and connected to everything. No karma. So therefore no reincarnation, which is what we always said, right? So there is no karma. There's only the resurrection. Only the connectedness to all things to form one body. Which is what we Christians say anyway. So how do all those bodies, is there really just one body? Is it our body? Who are we? How does this... Isn't it absolutely fantastic? We don't understand. Except, if we look at the flower there, no longer as if it's a dream.